Alex Turner's cell phone rang 47 times on the night of August 14, 2006. First call, his mother Sarah, 8:03 p.m. Alex, where are you? 10th call, his father David, 8:47 p.m. Son, this isn't funny anymore. 25th call, Cedar Point Security, 9:30 p.m. If you can hear this. Final call, his best friend Jake, 11:59 p.m. Dude, please be okay. The phone was on. The battery was charged. Cell tower data showed it was still inside Cedar Point Amusement Park, but every call went to voicemail. What park security didn't know was that Alex's phone was sitting in a maintenance tunnel 40 feet below the Thunder Mountain ride. It was deliberately placed there by someone who wanted to create the illusion that Alex was still moving through the park. When demolition crews found that phone 18 years later in 2024, its battery long dead, forensic analysts discovered something chilling in its memory. One unsent text message, typed at 7:51 p.m., never delivered. Maintenance guy acting weird, says there's a shortcut to the bathroom, something feels wrong. The send button was never pressed. This is the account of the 11 minutes that changed everything for the Turner family, and the 18-year investigation that finally revealed who was waiting for Alex at the end of that shortcut. The morning of August 14, 2006 began with the kind of excitement that only comes once a summer for families in the Midwest. The Turner family had been planning this trip to Cedar Point Amusement Park for 6 months. David Turner, a high school history teacher from Columbus, Ohio, had marked the date on their kitchen calendar in red marker back in February. His wife Sarah, a pediatric nurse at Nationwide Children's Hospital, had arranged her schedule around this specific Monday, knowing that weekday crowds at Cedar Point would be smaller than weekend masses. Their son Alex had just turned 16 3 weeks earlier, and this trip was partly a birthday celebration. Alex Turner was the kind of teenager that parents pointed to as an example of doing things right. He maintained a 3.8 GPA at Worthington High School, served as captain of the varsity skateboarding team that had won state championships 2 years running, and volunteered every Saturday at the local animal shelter. His younger sister Emma, just 13 years old, worshipped her older brother with the kind of uncomplicated admiration that would later make his disappearance even more devastating for her developing psyche. The Turner family pulled into Cedar Point's massive parking lot at exactly 9:47 a.m. David had insisted on arriving early to maximize their time in the park, a strategy born from his methodical nature as a history teacher who believed in planning and preparation. The August sun was already promising a scorching day, with temperatures forecast to reach 94 degrees by afternoon. Sarah had packed a cooler with water bottles and sunscreen, while Emma clutched a Cedar Point map she'd printed from the internet, certain colored markers already highlighting the rides she considered essential. Alex wore his favorite outfit that day, a detail that would later be repeated in thousands of missing person flyers and news broadcasts. Red Nike high tops that he'd saved 3 months of allowance to purchase, cargo shorts with multiple pockets perfect for storing his phone and wallet, and a gray t-shirt featuring his skateboarding team's logo. Around his neck hung a silver chain that his grandfather had given him before passing away 2 years earlier. His skateboard, a custom-painted board featuring intricate graffiti-style artwork he'd designed himself, remained locked in the family's Honda Odyssey, against park policy but too valuable to leave at home completely. The family's day unfolded with the manufactured joy that theme parks specialize in creating. They rode the Millennium Force first, a 310-foot-tall roller coaster that had Emma screaming with delight and Sarah gripping the safety bar with white knuckles. Alex recorded his sister's reaction on his phone, laughing as she emerged from the ride with wind-blown hair and an enormous smile. They conquered the top thrill dragster before the lines grew unbearable, shared funnel cakes near the midway, and took obligatory photos in front of various attractions that Sarah insisted would be important for their family album. By early evening, the Turner family had developed the comfortable exhaustion that comes from a full day of theme park activities. David's feet ached in his tennis shoes. Sarah had reapplied sunscreen 4 times, and Emma was experiencing a sugar crash from too much cotton candy. But Alex seemed energized, riding the natural high of adolescent invincibility and summer freedom. When they approached Thunder Mountain, one of Cedar Point's classic wooden roller coasters, Alex convinced his family to ride one more time, despite Emma's protests that her stomach couldn't handle another loop. The Thunder Mountain roller coaster had been a Cedar Point fixture since 1978. Its wooden frame creaked with character, and its track featured enough drops and turns to satisfy thrill seekers without being so extreme that it scared away moderate riders. The ride's operator that evening was a seasonal employee named Marcus Webb, a local college student working his second summer at Cedar Point. Webb's timesheet would later show he clocked in at 6:15 p.m. for the closing shift, taking over from the day operator without incident. The Turner family boarded Thunder Mountain at 7:38 p.m. Alex sat in seat 17, Emma beside him in seat 18, with David and Sarah directly behind them in seats 19 and 20. The ride's 3-minute duration felt both eternal and instant, as roller coasters do, a compression of time that tricks perception. When the train returned to the station at 7:42 p.m., the Turner family disembarked with shaky legs and genuine smiles, the kind of shared experience that families treasure. Security camera footage from multiple angles captured what happened next. Footage that would be analyzed frame by investigators, enhanced by FBI specialists, and eventually broadcast on national news programs. At 7:43 p.m., the Turner family walked down the Thunder Mountain exit ramp. Alex can be seen saying something to his parents, gesturing toward the nearby restroom facility. David nodded, and Sarah appeared to tell him something, probably reminding him where they'd meet. At 7:44 p.m., Alex Turner separated from his family, walking toward the men's restroom located approximately 100 feet from the Thunder Mountain exit. At 7:45 p.m., security cameras show Alex entering the restroom. Multiple angles confirm his entry, but capture nothing unusual about his demeanor or the surrounding area. The restroom, like all facilities at Cedar Point, was cleaned and checked every hour by park maintenance staff. The 7:00 p.m. check had been logged by Supervisor Richard Hayes, who would later tell investigators he noticed nothing out of the ordinary during his inspection. At 7:47 p.m., according to cell tower triangulation data that wouldn't be analyzed until much later, Alex's phone sent its last communication to the network. The phone had been in his right cargo pocket, set to vibrate mode. At exactly 7:47 and 23 seconds, Alex began typing a text message to his best friend Jake Morrison back in Columbus. The message was never completed, never sent, but remained in the phone's draft folder like a digital ghost. Maintenance guy acting weird. Says there's a shortcut to the bathroom, something feels wrong. Those 82 characters represented Alex Turner's last communication with the outside world. The message suggested he'd encountered someone, likely a park employee based on his description, who had offered or suggested an alternative route. What happened in the seconds after Alex began typing that message would remain unknown for 18 years, a black hole in the timeline that would torment investigators and destroy the Turner family's peace of mind. At 8:00 p.m., the Turner family had gathered near the park's iconic Sleeping Beauty castle for their planned group photo, a tradition they observed during every Cedar Point visit. David held his camera, Sarah stood adjusting Emma's hair, and there was an empty space where Alex should have been. Sarah assumed he was still in the restroom, perhaps waiting in line or dealing with teenage digestion issues. David checked his watch and suggested giving Alex 5 more minutes. At 8:03 p.m., Sarah called Alex's phone for the first time. The call went directly to voicemail after 4 rings, unusual because Alex typically answered his mother's calls immediately. Sarah left a message. "Alex, where are you? We're waiting at the castle for our picture. Call me back, honey." The Turner family's growing concern followed a predictable trajectory, familiar to any parent who has temporarily lost sight of a child in a crowded public space. Initial annoyance gave way to worry, which escalated to active searching, and finally crystallized into genuine panic. By 8:15 p.m., David had walked back to the Thunder Mountain area, checking the restroom and asking other guests if they'd seen a teenage boy in a gray skateboard team shirt. By 8:30 p.m., Sarah had called Alex's phone 7 more times, each call going to voicemail, her messages progressing from concerned to frightened. At 8:35 p.m., David Turner approached a Cedar Point security officer stationed near the Midway. Officer Jennifer Diaz, a 3-year veteran of park security, initially treated the report as a routine separated family member case, something that happened dozens of times daily at Cedar Point. She radioed the situation to her supervisor and began taking down Alex's description. Height, 6 feet tall. Weight, approximately 165 pounds. Hair, brown. Eyes, blue. Last seen wearing, gray t-shirt, cargo shorts, red Nike shoes. Distinguishing features, silver chain necklace, athletic build. Cedar Point's security protocol for missing persons activated immediately. Officer Diaz radioed Alex's description to all security personnel throughout the park. At 8:40 p.m., park-wide announcements began over the PA system, asking Alex Turner to report to the main security office. The announcements would continue every 10 minutes for the next 3 hours, growing more urgent as evening stretched into night. Sarah Turner's nursing background made her acutely aware of the statistical realities of missing children. She knew that most abductions occurred within the first few hours. She understood that every passing minute reduced the probability of a positive outcome. This clinical knowledge transformed her fear into something approaching terror. By 9 p.m., when Cedar Point's nightly fireworks display erupted over the park, Sarah was crying openly, clutching her daughter Emma while David coordinated with park security. At 9:15 p.m., Cedar Point security escalated the situation to Sandusky Police Department. Detective Mark Chen, a 15-year veteran who had worked countless missing person cases, arrived at the park by 9:30 p.m. Chen's initial interview with the Turner family established the timeline and began the systematic process of investigating what he hoped would be a teenager who had simply wandered off and would turn up embarrassed, but safe. Detective Chen's investigation began with the obvious starting point: the restroom where Alex was last seen. At 9:45 p.m., officers secured the facility and conducted a thorough search. The restroom featured 12 stalls, 8 urinals, and a maintenance closet at the far end. Each stall was checked, each door opened, each space examined. The maintenance closet, secured with a standard lock, was opened by park maintenance staff. Inside, cleaning supplies, tools, spare parts, nothing unusual. Nothing that explained where Alex Turner had gone. By 10:30 p.m., Cedar Point security had reviewed all available camera footage from the Thunder Mountain area. The recordings confirmed what the Turner family had reported. Alex entered the restroom at 7:45 p.m. What the footage didn't show was equally important. No one matching Alex's description exited that restroom in the following 2 hours before the facility was secured and searched. The security system logged every person entering and exiting through magnetic sensors installed in the doorways, standard technology that helped park management track facility usage for maintenance scheduling. The sensor data presented an impossible scenario. Between 7:45 p.m. and 9:45 p.m., 73 individuals entered the men's restroom near Thunder Mountain. The sensors detected 73 exits during that same period. But according to security footage, Alex Turner was not among those who departed. It was as if he had dematerialized inside a public restroom in full view of thousands of park guests. If you're finding yourself invested in understanding what happened to Alex Turner, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Your support helps bring attention to cases that deserve answers, and there's much more to uncover as this investigation unfolds. Detective Chen assembled a search team by 11 p.m. Cedar Point management made the decision to close the park early, a rare occurrence that cost them hundreds of thousands in revenue, but demonstrated their commitment to finding Alex. As the last guests were ushered toward exits and parking lots, teams of officers began systematically searching every corner of Cedar Point's 364 acres. The search that night involved 40 police officers, 30 park security personnel, and eventually the Ohio State Highway Patrol. K-9 units arrived by midnight, German shepherds trained in search and rescue. The dogs were given items from the Turner family's vehicle to establish Alex's scent, then released to work. The lead dog, a 5-year-old shepherd named Duke, picked up Alex's scent trail immediately, following it from the family's van through the park gates, along the path the Turner family had walked throughout the day, and finally to the Thunder Mountain restroom. Inside the restroom, Duke's behavior changed dramatically. The dog circled the facility twice, whining and pawing at the floor near the maintenance closet. Handler Officer Robert Martinez had worked with Duke for 3 years and trusted the dog's instincts completely. Duke's behavior indicated that Alex's scent was concentrated in that area, but there was nowhere for a person to hide. Martinez searched the closet again, removing every item, checking for hidden panels or doors. Nothing. As dawn broke over Cedar Point on August 15, 2006, the Turner family sat in the park's administrative offices, exhausted and terrified. Sarah hadn't slept, couldn't sleep, her nurse's training keeping her alert through sheer willpower and adrenaline. David had aged years overnight, his face drawn and gray in the fluorescent lighting. Emma had finally fallen asleep on a couch, her youth allowing brief escape from the nightmare unfolding around her. Detective Chen briefed the family at 6:30 a.m. with the honesty that comes from experience. They had searched the entire park twice. They had reviewed hundreds of hours of security footage. They had interviewed every park employee who had worked the previous evening. They had checked every ride, every restaurant, every shop, every storage area, every maintenance facility. Alex Turner was simply not at Cedar Point. The investigation's focus shifted from search to criminal inquiry. If Alex wasn't at the park, someone must have taken him from the park. But how? Cedar Point had security at every exit, cameras covering most major pathways, and thousands of witnesses. Moving an unwilling 16-year-old boy out of the park without being noticed seemed logistically impossible. Detective Chen's team began the exhaustive process of interviewing every employee who had worked on August 14th. Cedar Point employed over 5,000 seasonal workers during summer months, a massive labor force that created significant investigative challenges. Human Resources provided employee lists, schedules, and background check information. The park's policy required criminal background checks for all employees, but the checks in 2006 were less comprehensive than modern standards, focusing primarily on felony convictions and sex offender registries. One name that appeared during the initial employee interviews was Dennis Palmer, a 34-year-old maintenance supervisor who had worked at Cedar Point for 8 consecutive summers. Palmer's employment record was exemplary, featuring consistent positive performance reviews and 0 disciplinary actions. His background check had cleared without issues, showing no criminal history beyond a single speeding ticket from 1998. Palmer had been on duty the evening of August 14th, working the maintenance shift that covered the Thunder Mountain area. Detective Chen interviewed Palmer on August 16th at Cedar Point's maintenance facility. Palmer appeared cooperative and concerned, expressing sympathy for the Turner family and confusion about Alex's disappearance. Palmer's statement indicated he had been performing routine maintenance checks throughout his shift on August 14th, following the standard protocol that had him inspecting rides and facilities every 2 hours. He confirmed he had checked the Thunder Mountain restroom around 8 p.m., but had not noticed anything unusual. He had not seen Alex Turner specifically, though he acknowledged seeing dozens of teenagers throughout his shift. Palmer's alibi was corroborated by time-stamped maintenance logs showing his electronic badge had been scanned at various locations throughout Cedar Point during his shift. The logs indicated he had been nowhere near the Thunder Mountain restroom between 7:45 p.m. and 8 p.m., the critical window when Alex disappeared. The logs also showed Palmer had clocked out at his normal time of 11 p.m. and left the park without incident. What Detective Chen didn't know in 2006, what he couldn't have known with the technology and information available at the time, was that Dennis Palmer had been falsifying his maintenance logs for years. The electronic badge system relied on employees scanning their badges at designated checkpoints to prove they had completed required inspections. Palmer had developed a method of scanning his badge at multiple locations in rapid succession before his shift began, then retreating to areas off-camera where he could wait until the timestamps appeared legitimate on paper. The investigation into Alex Turner's disappearance generated massive media attention throughout Ohio and eventually nationally. The case featured every element that captured public fascination: a teenage victim with a wholesome background, a beloved family theme park, an impossible disappearance, and no clear answers. Nancy Grace devoted 3 segments to the case during the first week. America's Most Wanted produced a full episode hoping viewer tips might break the case open. The Turner family appeared on Today's Show, Good Morning America, and countless local news programs, always making the same plea: if anyone knew anything about Alex, please come forward. Sarah Turner became the public face of the family's anguish. Her television appearances were heartbreaking masterclasses in parental grief. She spoke directly to whoever had taken her son, begging them to let him go, to tell them where he was, to show mercy. She spoke to Alex himself, assuming he might be watching, telling him his family loved him and would never stop looking for him. David Turner was less comfortable with media attention but participated out of desperation. believing that keeping Alex's face in public view might generate the lead that brought him home. The FBI joined the investigation on August 18th, 4 days after Alex's disappearance. Special Agent Victoria Ross, who specialized in child abduction cases, established a task force that coordinated local, state, and federal resources. Agent Ross brought sophisticated analytical tools and experience from dozens of similar cases. She also brought realistic expectations based on grim statistics. The probability of finding an abducted teenager alive decreased dramatically after the first 48 hours. Agent Ross's team conducted hundreds of interviews with Cedar Point guests who had been at the park on August 14th. The FBI set up a tip line that received over 2,000 calls in the first month, each one requiring evaluation and follow-up. Most tips were well-intentioned but useless. People who thought they saw someone matching Alex's description at gas stations or rest stops across multiple states. Some tips were from attention seekers and troubled individuals who inserted themselves into high-profile cases. A handful of tips seemed potentially credible and required significant investigative resources to pursue and ultimately eliminate. One particularly persistent tip came from a truck driver named Michael Dawson, who contacted the FBI on August 25th, claiming he'd seen a teenage boy matching Alex's description at a rest stop near Toledo around midnight on August 15th. Dawson described the boy as appearing disoriented and possibly drugged, accompanied by an older man who seemed nervous and controlling. The FBI devoted significant resources to tracking down Dawson's account, reviewing security footage from the rest stop, and interviewing other travelers who had been there that night. The investigation revealed that Dawson had indeed been at the rest stop, but the teenage boy he'd seen was later identified as a runaway from Michigan, with no connection to Alex Turner. As summer turned to fall in 2006, the active investigation began its inevitable transition toward cold case status. Detective Chen continued working the case, but other responsibilities demanded his attention. The FBI task force gradually wound down operations as new cases required resources. The Turner family returned to Columbus and attempted to maintain some semblance of normal life, though normal would never exist for them again. Sarah Turner took a leave of absence from her nursing job, unable to focus on caring for other people's children when her own child was missing. She converted Alex's bedroom into a command center for her own investigation, covering walls with maps, timelines, and photographs. She maintained a database of every tip that came through the FBI hotline, cross-referencing information and looking for patterns that professional investigators might have missed. Her obsession was complete and consuming, a mother's love transformed into a relentless engine of desperate hope. David Turner returned to teaching but found himself going through the motions without real engagement. His students that fall semester would later remember him as distant and sad, the light gone from his eyes even when he smiled. He had been a popular teacher before Alex's disappearance, known for making history come alive through storytelling and humor. After August 14th, history became something that had happened to someone else in another life, before everything that mattered was taken away. Emma Turner struggled most visibly with the loss of her brother. At 13, she was old enough to understand what had happened, but not old enough to process the trauma effectively. She developed anxiety that manifested in checking behaviors, repeatedly ensuring that doors were locked and that her parents were where they said they would be. She lost interest in the activities she had enjoyed, including dance classes and time with friends. Therapy helped marginally, but the fundamental wound of her brother's disappearance couldn't be addressed through counseling techniques designed for normal childhood challenges. The Turner family's annual Christmas card in 2006 featured 3 people instead of 4, an absence that screamed from the photograph. Sarah couldn't bring herself to send them out, couldn't face the sympathetic responses from relatives who didn't know what to say. The cards remained in a box in her closet, a small representation of how Alex's disappearance had altered even the most mundane family traditions. As months became years, the Turner family learned to navigate a world divided into before and after. Before August 14th, 2006, they had been a normal American family with normal concerns and aspirations. After that date, they became the family whose son disappeared, defined by tragedy and loss. Sarah attended support groups for families of missing children, finding some comfort in the company of others who understood her specific flavor of grief. David threw himself into his work, taking on additional responsibilities at school to keep his mind occupied. Emma eventually returned to something approaching normal adolescence, though she would later admit that she had simply learned to perform normalcy rather than actually experiencing it. Detective Chen never stopped thinking about Alex Turner's case, even as other investigations crossed his desk. He reviewed the files quarterly, looking for something he might have missed, some detail that could break the case open. He attended conferences on missing persons investigations and child abduction cases, always wondering if new techniques or technologies might provide answers. In 2010, he authorized the use of new cell phone tracking software that had become available, hoping it might reveal something from the data they had collected in 2006. The analysis confirmed what they already knew. Alex's phone had been inside Cedar Point when he disappeared, and then it had gone silent. In 2012, 6 years after Alex's disappearance, Sarah Turner contacted a private investigator named Marcus Webb who specialized in cold cases. Webb was expensive, his services funded by Sarah's inheritance from her mother's estate, but his reputation suggested he got results where official investigations stalled. Webb spent 3 months reviewing every aspect of Alex's case, conducting his own interviews with Cedar Point employees and re-examining evidence with fresh eyes. Webb's investigation produced one potentially significant finding. Through extensive interviews with former Cedar Point maintenance workers, Webb learned about the extensive system of underground tunnels that existed beneath the park. These tunnels, built when Cedar Point was expanded in the 1970s, housed utilities, storage, and maintenance equipment. More importantly, the tunnels connected various areas of the park through passages that didn't appear on public maps or even standard employee training materials. Webb obtained partial blueprints of Cedar Point's infrastructure through public records requests and compared them to what former employees described. The discrepancies suggested there were sections of tunnels that weren't documented in any official capacity, either because they predated modern record-keeping or because they had been modified unofficially over decades of park operation. Webb hypothesized that Alex could have been taken through these tunnels, moved beneath the park away from cameras and witnesses, and removed from Cedar Point without anyone seeing. Detective Chen reviewed Webb's findings with interest but frustration. The tunnel theory was plausible and even compelling, but it was fundamentally unprovable without physical evidence or witnesses. Cedar Point management cooperated with a renewed search of accessible tunnel areas, but the sections that Webb suggested might be unofficial or unmarked couldn't be located or verified. The investigation gained no actionable information, adding another layer of possibility without providing any answers. The 10th anniversary of Alex Turner's disappearance in 2016 brought renewed media attention. Sarah Turner gave interviews to multiple news outlets, using the anniversary to keep her son's case in public consciousness. She had aged dramatically in the decade since August 14, 2006, her hair gone gray and her face marked by years of grief. In the interviews, she made the same plea she had been making for 10 years. Someone knew something about what happened to Alex, and that person needed to come forward. What Sarah didn't know, what no one investigating the case knew, was that Dennis Palmer watched every one of those anniversary interviews from his apartment in Columbus, Ohio. Palmer had left Cedar Point in 2008, citing family reasons for his resignation. He had moved to Columbus and found work with a commercial building maintenance company, a job that gave him access to the kinds of buildings and spaces that most people never thought about. Palmer's new life in Columbus included a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a steady job that required minimal social interaction, and careful habits that kept him invisible to the people around him. In 2018, 12 years after Alex Turner's disappearance, Detective Chen retired from the Sandusky Police Department. His replacement, Detective Jennifer Martinez, inherited dozens of cold cases, including Alex's file. Martinez was a younger investigator with a different approach to unsolved cases, believing that modern technology and fresh eyes could crack even the oldest mysteries. She requested that all physical evidence from cold cases be reviewed for potential DNA analysis, using techniques that hadn't existed when the evidence was originally collected. The breakthrough that would eventually solve Alex Turner's disappearance came not from investigative work, but from corporate restructuring. In January 2024, Cedar Point's parent company announced plans to renovate and modernize significant portions of the park. The renovation included demolishing several older attractions and facilities, including the Thunder Mountain roller coaster, which was set for replacement with a newer, more technologically advanced ride. The demolition was scheduled to begin in March 2024. Luis Martinez was 34 years old and had worked in commercial demolition for 12 years when his company won the contract for Cedar Point's renovation project. Martinez took pride in his work, approaching demolition as a skilled craft rather than simple destruction. On March 12, 2024, Martinez was working on the preliminary demolition of the Thunder Mountain maintenance area when his sledgehammer punched through what he assumed was a standard concrete wall. The wall gave way more easily than Martinez expected, crumbling to reveal a space behind it that shouldn't have existed according to the blueprints his company had been provided. Martinez paused his work and called his supervisor to report the discrepancy. What he had uncovered was a small room, approximately 10 feet by 10 feet, completely unmarked on any official documentation of Cedar Point's infrastructure. Cedar Point's project manager arrived within 30 minutes to inspect what Martinez had found. The hidden room appeared to have been deliberately constructed and then sealed, its entrance covered by a false wall that matched the surrounding structure. The project manager immediately recognized the potential significance of the discovery and contacted Cedar Point's legal department. By end of business on March 12th, the Sandusky Police Department had been notified. Detective Martinez arrived at Cedar Point on March 13th with a team of forensic specialists. The hidden room measured exactly 9 feet by 11 feet and appeared to have been carved out of the existing tunnel system beneath Thunder Mountain, possibly during construction in the 1970s, or added later through unofficial modification. The room had a single entrance from the maintenance tunnel system, the entrance that had been sealed with the false wall Luis Martinez had demolished. Inside the hidden room, forensic specialists found evidence that would finally explain what happened to Alex Turner on August 14, 2006. A backpack was discovered in one corner, its fabric faded and covered in dust, but still intact. The backpack was gray with red trim, matching the description of the bag Alex had been wearing according to his family's statement. Inside the backpack, investigators found Alex's wallet, his driver's license visible through the clear plastic window. The photograph on the license showed a smiling 16-year-old boy who looked exactly like the pictures that had been distributed on missing person posters for 18 years. The backpack also contained Alex's cell phone, the device that had rung 47 times on August 14, 2006. The phone's battery was dead, its screen dark, but the device itself appeared undamaged. Forensic specialists carefully bagged the phone for analysis, hopeful that data recovery might be possible despite the years of abandonment. Near the backpack, investigators found a skateboard propped against the wall. The skateboard featured custom graffiti-style artwork, and photographs of the board were quickly matched to images from the Turner family's photo albums. This was Alex Turner's skateboard, the one he had left locked in the family van at Cedar Point's parking lot. The presence of Alex's possessions in the hidden room confirmed what investigators had suspected, but couldn't prove. Alex had been taken beneath Cedar Point through the maintenance tunnel system, held in this concealed space and presumably killed here or elsewhere. But more disturbing than the backpack and skateboard was what else they found in the hidden room. Carved into the concrete walls were sets of initials and dates, made with what appeared to be a metal tool scratching through the concrete surface. The first set of initials read, AT, 8/14/06, followed by the words "Help Me," scratched in desperate, irregular letters. Below Alex's message were 7 other sets of initials, each with different dates spanning from 1999 to 2013. The dates suggested that Alex Turner had not been Dennis Palmer's first victim, and he had not been the last. Detective Martinez immediately initiated a missing persons database search for individuals whose initials and disappearance dates matched the graffiti in the hidden room. The results were chilling. Each set of initials corresponded to a missing person case, all teenagers or young adults who had disappeared from Cedar Point or the surrounding area over a 14-year period. Dennis Palmer had been operating beneath one of America's most popular theme parks, using his position as a maintenance supervisor to identify, isolate, and kill victims with systematic efficiency. The FBI was contacted immediately, and Special Agent Robert Chen, the son of the original Detective Mark Chen who had investigated Alex's disappearance, took lead on the expanded investigation. Agent Chen reviewed the 7 other missing persons cases that matched the initials in the hidden room, finding disturbing similarities in each disappearance. All victims were between 14 and 22 years old. All had disappeared from Cedar Point, or immediately surrounding areas during summer months. All disappearances had occurred between 1999 and 2013, then mysteriously stopped. The reason the disappearances stopped in 2013 became clear when investigators checked Cedar Point employment records and cross-referenced them with criminal databases. Dennis Palmer had resigned from Cedar Point in 2008, which didn't match the timeline initially. But further investigation revealed that Palmer had been arrested in Columbus in 2013 on an unrelated assault charge. The arrest stemmed from a bar fight that had escalated beyond Palmer's ability to talk his way out of trouble. Palmer had served 6 months in county jail for the assault, his first and only criminal conviction, which had apparently disrupted his pattern of killings permanently. Current address records showed Dennis Palmer living in a Columbus apartment, working for a commercial maintenance company under a slightly modified name, Dennis J. Palmer instead of Dennis Palmer. Enough of a difference that background checks focused on the exact name wouldn't necessarily flag him. On March 15, 2024, a tactical team from Columbus Police Department and FBI agents executed a warrant at Palmer's apartment at 6 a.m. Dennis Palmer answered his door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, appearing confused by the presence of armed officers. He offered no resistance, possibly recognizing that the discovery he had feared for 18 years had finally occurred. Palmer was arrested and transported to Columbus Police Headquarters for questioning. In his apartment, investigators found a computer containing thousands of photographs, news articles about missing persons cases, and journals documenting Palmer's crimes in disturbing detail. The journals revealed a meticulous mind that had planned each abduction carefully, documenting victim selection, optimal timing, and methods for avoiding detection. Palmer's interrogation began at 9:08 a.m. on March 15th, conducted by Detective Martinez and Agent Chen. Palmer initially invoked his right to remain silent, spending the first 3 hours of interrogation sitting quietly, while investigators laid out the evidence against him: the hidden room beneath Thunder Mountain, the initials carved in concrete, the backpack containing Alex Turner's possessions, the other victims whose disappearances matched the dates and initials found at the scene. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. At 12:47 p.m., Dennis Palmer began talking. His confession would eventually span 14 hours over 2 days, detailing crimes that spanned 15 years and 8 victims. Palmer spoke with the emotionless precision of someone describing a hobby rather than murder, explaining how he had constructed the hidden room in 2001 by working night shifts and slowly excavating an unused section of Cedar Point's tunnel system. He described the process with technical pride, noting how he had removed debris in small amounts over months to avoid detection, how he had reinforced the walls to prevent collapse, and how he had sealed the entrance with a false wall that matched the surrounding infrastructure perfectly. Palmer's method was consistent across all 8 victims. He would identify a target, usually someone who appeared vulnerable or isolated. He would approach them in his maintenance uniform, establishing authority and trust through his official Cedar Point identification. He would suggest taking them through a maintenance entrance or tunnel, claiming it was a shortcut to their destination or that he needed their help with something innocuous, like reporting a safety hazard. Once in the tunnels, away from cameras and witnesses, Palmer would overpower his victims and bring them to the hidden room he had constructed specifically for this purpose. Alex Turner, according to Palmer's confession, had been held in the hidden room for approximately 8 hours before Palmer killed him. Alex had fought harder than most victims, Palmer admitted with something resembling respect, which was why Palmer had been forced to restrain him more severely than some others. The text message that Alex had been typing when Palmer approached him, the message that was never sent, had been accurate in every detail. Palmer had approached Alex outside the restroom, offered to show him a shortcut through a maintenance area, and Alex had been suspicious enough to start warning his friend Jake, but not suspicious enough to refuse outright or to seek help from nearby park guests. The forensic analysis of Alex Turner's cell phone, recovered from the hidden room, provided additional heartbreaking details. Data recovery specialists were able to extract the phone's complete history, including the 47 unanswered calls from his family and friends. They also recovered the unsent text message, confirming that Alex had sensed danger but had been overpowered before he could complete his warning. The phone's last activity before the battery died was at 4:23 a.m. on August 15, 2006, approximately 21 hours after Alex had separated from his family to use a restroom. The timestamp suggested that Alex had been alive for many hours after his disappearance, trapped in darkness beneath a theme park, while thousands of people searched for him above. The investigation into Dennis Palmer's background revealed how thoroughly he had hidden in plain sight for decades. Palmer had been born in Sandusky in 1972, growing up in a working-class family without apparent trauma or abuse that might explain his later crimes according to traditional psychological profiles. He had been an average student, held regular jobs, and presented himself as unremarkable in every way. Psychological evaluation after his arrest diagnosed Palmer as a psychopath with exceptional ability to mimic normal social behavior, the kind of predator who could function in society without detection because he understood how to perform normalcy convincingly. Palmer's employment at Cedar Point had been his hunting ground, providing access to thousands of potential victims who passed through the park each summer. His position in maintenance gave him unique knowledge of the park's infrastructure, including the tunnel system that existed beneath the rides and attractions. Most importantly, his uniform gave him authority and trust. Visitors to Cedar Point assumed that employees, especially maintenance workers in official uniforms, were safe and helpful. That assumption had allowed Palmer to operate for years without suspicion, approaching vulnerable teenagers under the guise of being a helpful park employee. The 7 other victims whose initials appeared in the hidden room were identified through missing persons databases and compared against Palmer's confession. Each family was contacted and informed that their missing loved one's case had been solved, though the resolution brought little comfort after so many years of uncertainty. The victims included teenagers from Ohio, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, young people who had visited Cedar Point for a day of fun with family or friends and never returned home. Their families had endured the same torment as the Turners, living in the terrible limbo of not knowing while Palmer continued his normal life just miles away. Sarah Turner received the call about Alex's case being solved on March 16, 2024, 18 years and 7 months after her son disappeared. Detective Martinez made the call personally, explaining what had been found beneath Thunder Mountain and confirming that Dennis Palmer had confessed to killing Alex. Sarah's reaction was complex, mixing relief at finally knowing what happened with renewed anguish at the confirmation that her son was dead and the knowledge of what he had endured in his final hours. The phone call lasted 47 minutes, mirroring the 47 calls that had gone unanswered on the night Alex disappeared. David Turner was teaching a class when he received the message that Detective Martinez needed to speak with him immediately. He left his classroom, knowing before he answered the phone that something significant had happened. When Martinez explained about Palmer's arrest and confession, David felt 18 years of hope drain away, replaced by a grief that was somehow both crushing and oddly finite. Not knowing had been torture, keeping hope alive even when logic suggested Alex was dead. Knowing was its own kind of death, but at least it was an ending, rather than an eternal question mark. Emma Turner, now 31 years old and working as a social worker in Columbus, received the news from her parents. She had been 13 when her brother disappeared, and her entire adult life had been shaped by his absence. The confirmation of Alex's death hit her hard, triggering anxiety and depression that required intensive therapy to manage. But Emma also felt something she described as freedom, the ability to finally mourn her brother properly, rather than existing in the limbo of not knowing whether to grieve or hope. The Turner family held a memorial service for Alex on April 14, 2024, almost exactly 18 years after his disappearance. The service was held at their church in Columbus, attended by hundreds of people who had known Alex or followed his case over the years. Sarah spoke about her son, sharing memories of his kindness, his humor, and his potential that had been stolen. David read from a letter he had written to Alex over the years, updating him on family news and telling him how much he was missed. Emma shared accounts of growing up with a brother she idolized and losing him at a formative age when she needed him most. Dennis Palmer was charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder, 8 counts of kidnapping, and multiple additional felonies related to his crimes. His trial was scheduled for October 2024, though Palmer's detailed confession made the outcome inevitable. The prosecution was seeking the death penalty, and few observers expected the jury would have difficulty reaching that verdict, given the overwhelming evidence and the calculated nature of Palmer's crimes over such an extended period. Cedar Point issued a statement expressing horror at what had occurred beneath their park and extending deepest sympathies to the families of Palmer's victims. The company announced a complete review of their security protocols and tunnel access, implementing measures designed to prevent any employee from operating without oversight. The statement acknowledged that the park's background check systems and employee monitoring procedures in the 1990s and 2000s had been inadequate, allowing Palmer to operate undetected for far too long. Dennis Palmer's trial began on October 7, 2024. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including Palmer's detailed confession, physical evidence from the hidden room, and forensic analysis linking Palmer to each of his victims. The defense, constrained by the strength of the evidence against their client, argued for life imprisonment rather than the death penalty, citing Palmer's cooperation with the investigation and the closure his confession had provided to victims' families. The argument held little weight with jurors who had heard the details of Palmer's methodical planning and the suffering he had inflicted on 8 young people and their families. The jury deliberated for 7 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The sentencing phase of the trial lasted another week, during which victims' family members provided impact statements describing how Palmer's crimes had destroyed their lives. Sarah Turner spoke for 20 minutes, addressing Palmer directly and describing 18 years of not knowing what happened to her son, 18 years of hoping he might still be alive somewhere, and the unbearable pain of learning the truth about his final hours. On November 3, 2024, Dennis Palmer was sentenced to 8 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. Ohio's death penalty statute technically applied to his crimes, but the judge accepted the prosecution's recommendation for life imprisonment, citing the value of Palmer's cooperation in recovering remains and providing closure to families who had waited decades for answers. The resolution of Alex Turner and Dennis Palmer's other victims raised difficult questions about safety, trust, and the ways predators operate in modern society. Palmer had been able to kill 8 people over 15 years while working at a family entertainment venue, protected by a uniform and a facade of normalcy that no one thought to question. The case highlighted how institutional settings, even those designed for enjoyment and family bonding, can harbor danger when oversight and security protocols have gaps that allow determined predators to exploit them. For the Turner family, Palmer's conviction provided a form of closure, but not peace. Sarah Turner continued therapy and eventually returned to nursing, finding purpose in caring for others even as her own wounds remained unhealed. David Turner retired from teaching in 2025, unable to continue working with teenagers who reminded him too much of the son he had lost. Emma Turner channeled her experience into advocacy work for families of missing persons, using her social work training to provide support and resources to others navigating similar tragedies. Cedar Point implemented comprehensive security reforms following Palmer's crimes. Every section of the park's tunnel system was mapped and secured, with electronic access controls that tracked employee movements in real time. Employees could no longer access maintenance areas without their movements being logged and monitored through sophisticated security systems. Background checks were expanded to include psychological evaluation and periodic reassessment throughout employment. While no system could be perfect, the reforms represented a genuine effort to prevent anyone from replicating Dennis Palmer's crimes. In the years following Dennis Palmer's conviction, the Turner family participated in documentary projects and news specials about Alex's case. They did so reluctantly, but felt obligated to help prevent similar tragedies. Sarah Turner became a powerful voice for missing persons advocacy, testifying before congressional committees and working with nonprofit organizations focused on child safety. Her testimony helped shape legislation requiring more comprehensive background checks and employee monitoring systems at entertainment venues nationwide. The skateboard that had been found in Palmer's hidden room, Alex Turner's custom-painted board with graffiti-style artwork, was returned to the Turner family after serving as evidence in the trial. Sarah couldn't bear to look at it initially, the board representing both her son's creativity and the scene of his final hours. Eventually, she had the board mounted and displayed in Alex's room, which she had maintained as a memorial space for 18 years. The skateboard became a reminder of who Alex had been, not just how he had died. The unsent text message that Alex had been typing when Palmer approached him became a rallying cry for safety advocates who emphasized the importance of trusting instincts and being aware of surroundings. The message demonstrated that Alex had sensed danger, but had been socialized to be polite and accommodating, even when his instincts warned him something was wrong. Teaching young people to prioritize safety over politeness became a central theme in safety education programs developed in response to Palmer's crimes. Alex Turner's legacy extended beyond his death, influencing safety protocols, inspiring legislation, and creating awareness about the vulnerabilities that exist even in places designed for happiness and family bonding. His name became associated not just with tragedy, but with the importance of vigilance, the value of trusting instincts, and the persistent love of families who refuse to give up seeking answers even after decades of uncertainty. The resolution of Alex Turner's account was written not in police reports or court transcripts, but in the ways his memory continued to influence the people who had known and loved him. His former teammates on the skateboarding team established a scholarship in his name, providing funding for young athletes who demonstrated the same combination of talent and character that had defined Alex. The scholarship required recipients to perform community service, honoring Alex's commitment to volunteering at the animal shelter every Saturday morning. Sarah Turner wrote a book about her experience that was published in 2026 and became a bestseller, with proceeds donated to organizations supporting families of missing persons. David Turner found solace in returning to the historical research he had loved before August 14, 2006, eventually publishing a volume documenting 2 centuries of life in Columbus. Emma Turner married in 2027 and later named her first son Alexander Turner Martinez, ensuring that her brother's name would continue into a new generation and be spoken with love rather than only sorrow. The phone that had rung 47 times on August 14, 2006, eventually found its way to the Smithsonian Institution as part of an exhibit on criminal investigations and forensic technology. The phone represented both the tragedy of unanswered calls and the power of digital evidence in solving crimes. Visitors to the exhibit could see the phone and read about Alex's case, connecting the abstract concepts of investigation and evidence to a real account of loss and resolution. For anyone who has followed Alex Turner's account from that August evening in 2006 to the resolution in 2024, the case represents both the worst of human nature and the resilience of families who refuse to give up seeking truth. The phone that rang 47 times now sits silent in a museum case, but the account it tells continues to resonate with anyone who understands that beneath the surface of ordinary life, both danger and extraordinary love can exist simultaneously. The resolution came not through brilliant detective work alone, but through the intersection of persistence, advancing technology, and simple chance that a sledgehammer struck the right wall at the right time, finally bringing light to secrets that had been buried in darkness for nearly 2 decades.